Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. Today we are answering a question that I think we actually get pretty frequently, and especially for newer writers, I think it's important to make the distinction. So there's a lot of overlap between middle grade and young adult fiction or nonfiction. And we wanted to talk about the difference because it's more than just the character age, and I feel like that's where a lot of people get tripped up. They might just make their character 16 and think it's a young adult novel, or make them 12 and think it's a middle grade novel.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that goes into each of those formats because they're not genres, they're formats. There's a lot that goes into each of those formats that makes them distinct, and we wanted to let authors know what they were.
And also to add a little to your same point, just because you have a 16-year-old narrator or lead character doesn't also make it middle grade or YA. It could be still an adult book for a lot of the same reasons, like it could be the voice, the writing, things like that.
Right.
So the age of the character doesn't mean everything.
No, I will say the age of the character does indicate the intended targeted readership.
Yes.
I say intended and targeted because a lot of adults read YA, maybe a lot of adults read middle grade as well. So it's not the only readership, but the targeted readership. When we write a young adult novel with a high schooler, we are targeting readers in the high school range, or just fresh out of high school. Middle grade, we are usually targeting people in junior high school, maybe even a little younger because kids tend to read aspirationally.
Yeah.
So
I
they
was gonna
might
say
read
kids.
from fifth graders might read middle grade because that's the kind of mindset that they're in. So that's the most important thing to know about character age. It should indicate intended readership. But there's a lot that goes into it beyond there. And Jessica, I think you picked up on the most important one, which is voice and tone. Anybody who's read middle grade and YA will know that there is a wide berth of between the voice and the tone in those things. Middle grade tends to be a little lighter. I shouldn't say that. It's not entirely true.
Right, because you could still handle really heavy subjects, but there is a different voice to it. And
Younger. It's a little younger is what I should
Mhm.
have said. Especially the market right now, a lot of YA tends to skew older. As we said, kids read aspirationally. YA tends to be a little more of a mature voice, dealing with more mature content.
Mhm.
Middle grade is naturally going to be a little less mature in that respect.
Mhm.
And then the markets are different too. So not just what's working in the market, because that is always different. There are things that will work in YA that don't work in YA. Like fantasy might be big at one point when it's not big in middle grade, and vice versa. So they have their own individual markets. I also think it's important to know that YA is often a self-purchase, or marketing can be done directly to the reader. Middle grade is not quite that. Middle grade still has gatekeepers to contend with, school and library professionals, parents, guardians. All of those folks are typically buying the book for the reader.
Yeah.
In YA, it's a little different. I mean, there are probably some adults that still buy for YA readers, but most YA readers are probably on the internet, coming across books on TikTok, especially right now. So those books are being marketed towards the reader themselves.
Yeah. That's a really interesting topic because that does make a difference when how you're marketing the book.
Yeah, it does. And also considering like sales and stuff too, right?
Mhm.
Especially when we're dealing with a massive influx of book bans right now.
Mm.
While in schools, what young adult readers will probably face the same challenges, they can usually find books outside of their institutions. A lot of
Mhm.
middle grade readers might not.
Yeah. And our recommendation is on all of this is the same as it always is, really. If you are writing something, if you have an idea, this is your targeted age, this is the age of your character, you've got to be reading. You have
Absolutely.
to go to the bookstore and the library, and I would just suggest you find your librarian and say, what are the middle grade books I should be reading? What are the YA books I should be reading? And then also consider your genre in that. If you're writing contemporary middle grade or YA, you should be reading up on contemporary novels in those age groups, not just fantasy, for example. And if you're writing fantasy, you should be reading. And I would also suggest reading widely in the adult market too, because I think understanding the distinction between it's not just knowing what that market tone and voice typically lends itself to, but being able to compare and understand. You'll understand what the YA tone and voice is a little bit better if you're reading both middle grade and adult at the same time, so you can see the comparison.
Also talk to kids. if you have kids in your life, talk to kids. I think that that's so clear to me when people are not around kids at all.
Yeah, it's funny. When I worked in editorial, YA was very different than it is now.
Yeah.
And it drove me, I couldn't work on the books at all because they were so condescending in the tone they used. It was clearly an adult trying to write kid speak, and it was dated and weird. And that's the other thing, give your kids credit. I think too often
Take the reader
authors,
seriously.
yeah, too often authors try to write slang and they don't, you know, these kids have big issues these days, and they are talking and seeing on the internet and experiencing big things that a lot of adults don't want to even know that they're facing. So sort of dumbing things down does not work for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the most important part. Like if people, a lot of writers might have been raising kids 10 years ago, it's not the same as being a kid now,
No, it is
especially
not.
post-COVID.
It is.
So read, talk to kids. There's a lot of other things to consider too, right? There are lines for and boundaries for content, particularly in middle grade. I think that's a conversation for another time, truthfully. And I think
Yeah.
as you read, you'll probably start to suss those out on your own. You'll start to see where things are drawn, like where that line in the sand is drawn. So I don't think, I also think that it's not something that's hard and fast. I think their boundaries are always being pushed in what can be included in books. And I would hate to set like a hard and fast rule of this is not for middle grade. So the best thing you could be doing is reading and reading widely across genres in these formats because you'll see what can be done across across genre.
Mhm.
But those are the most important things to consider. Your voice and tone is the first thing that the editor or agent are going to consider. And if it's not quite right for the format, for the readership, I think that's just a hurdle you're not going to get over.
Well, and I was going to say, when you're reading across age groups, and again, adult included, you also need to have an understanding of where your voice fits, because not every author can write for everybody. It's just a fact. There are certain things about your writing that you can change and certain things that you might not be able to. So you might have to look and say, this is a great idea. It's a great middle grade idea, but at the end of the day, I'm not a middle grade writer.
Right.
And so that might be something you need to consider.
Yeah, totally. Um, I think that's pretty much it, though. I think it was just a very top level conversation to introduce the differences. I think it does require research on every writer's end.
Mhm.
So go forth, go to the library, pick up some books, read as many as you can. And we hope it was helpful. If you have any specific questions, put them below and we will try and get you an answer. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time.